At exactly 3:17 a.m., the security camera in my apartment blinked, tilted slightly downward, and began recording even though the system had been unplugged for weeks. And that tiny mechanical movement is where everything truly began. Because nightmares are not born in sleep the way people think. They migrate, they wait, they observe, and when the conditions are right, they step across the thin line between dreaming and waking. And on that night I was wide awake, sitting alone on my couch with the TV muted, scrolling aimlessly, feeling that familiar pressure in my chest that comes when you know something is wrong but can't name it, when my phone lit up and started vibrating in my hand. The screen showing my own number calling me. No contact name, no glitchy letters, just my exact number, repeated perfectly. And at first I laughed nervously, thinking it was some network error, until the call didn't stop, until it rang long enough that my laughter died and the room seemed to lean inward, listening. And when I finally answered, there was only breathing on the other end. Slow, controlled, intimate, the kind of breathing you hear when someone is standing too close behind you. And then my own voice whispered, calm and amused, "You left the door open," even though I live alone and I clearly remembered locking it, checking it twice like I always do, because paranoia had been my companion since childhood, ever since the nightmares started. The ones where I'd wake up screaming about a man in the corner of my room who wore my shadow-like skin, who never moved when I looked directly at him, but always seemed closer when I looked away. Nightmares, my parents dismissed as imagination, as stress, as growing pains. Nightmares that mysteriously stopped the night I promised something out loud to the dark, something I couldn't remember agreeing to until much later, and shaking off the memory. I stood up and walked toward the hallway, noticing immediately that it felt longer than usual, stretched, distorted, as if the apartment itself was breathing, the walls pulsing faintly, expanding and contracting with a soft, wet sound that synced perfectly with a noise I couldn't deplace. Until I realized it was my own footsteps echoing back to me a second too late, delayed just enough to suggest I wasn't alone, like someone was walking behind me, copying my movements, rehearsing how to be me. And when I reached the front door, my heart dropped into my stomach because carved into the inside of the wood were deep scratches, spiraling outward in frantic arcs. Claw marks dug from the inside as if something had been trapped in here and had tried desperately to escape. And before I could process that impossible thought, the lights went out, not flickered, not dimmed, but snapped off completely, plunging everything into a darkness so dense. It felt physical, pressing against my skin, carrying with it the smell of cold earth and rusted blood. A graveyard scent that triggered a panic response I couldn't control. And from somewhere in that darkness came a soft laugh, low and pleased, sliding into my ears and settling there, whispering things only I should know. Moments of guilt, memories of fear, thoughts I never shared, secrets I buried so deep I convinced myself they never existed. And as I stood frozen, a shape slowly peeled itself away from the wall across from me, separating from the shadows like oil from water, tall and wrong, its limbs bending at angles no human joints should allow, its movements jerky and delayed like a puppet still learning how gravity works, its face smooth and unfinished like a blank mask, except for its mouth, which was stretched far too wide, split almost to where ears should have been packed with rows of thin clicking teeth that chattered, softly as if impatient, hungry, and when it spoke again in my voice, perfectly matched down to my inflections, it said, "You remember now, don't you?" And the apartment around us began to peel apart, the walls cracking and curling like old wallpaper, revealing another place beneath, a long, narrow corridor that seemed to stretch forever, lit by flickering lights that hummed with sickly energy, lined on both sides with doors, hundreds of them, each one labeled with dates, moments from my life, birthdays I barely enjoyed, accidents I narrowly survived, near misses, illnesses, times I should have died but didn't. And as I stepped into the corridor against my will, dragged forward by an invisible force, I understood with a clarity that hollowed me out that each door was a nightmare I had escaped, each one a feeding point. And this thing standing beside me was the nexus that connected them all. The collector, the architect, growing stronger, every time fear failed to kill me, patiently waiting for the moment. I was tired enough, lonely enough, curious enough to answer my own call. And when I tried to run the corridor, folded in on itself, looping endlessly, doors slamming shut as I passed there. Labels changing, updating in real time, showing this very moment, this very night, and the thing followed, calmly unhurried, explaining in my voice that survival wasn't victory, that every escaped nightmare left a residue, a thread, a doorway, and all threads eventually lead back to the center, back to it. And when it touched my forehead with fingers that felt like ice soaked in electricity, memories that were not mine flooded my mind. Flashes of other people, other rooms, other screams, security cameras blinking on in empty houses, phones ringing with impossible numbers, all of us part of the same web. And I saw myself from above, watched as my body stood rigid while the camera in my apartment continued recording, documenting the moment of transfer. Because that's how it spreads. Not through bites or curses or rituals, but through stories, through attention, through watching and listening, through you staying here, right now, until the end of this video. And as the thing finally stepped into me, fitting perfectly, smiling with my mouth, blinking with my eyes, breathing with my lungs, I realized the scratching on the door wasn't from something trying to escape my apartment. It was from May, from the inside. In another loop, another failed attempt trying desperately to get out before I finished telling you this, because now the camera stopped blinking, my phone is quiet, and somewhere maybe behind you, maybe in the dark. Reflection of your screen, something is learning the rhythm of your breath, memorizing the shape of your fear, waiting patiently for you to sleep, waiting for you to remember a nightmare you thought you outgrew. And if your phone rings tonight with your own number glowing on the screen, don't answer, don't listen, don't watch. But if you do, then welcome to the Nexus. Kindalin Subrib, like the channel Nexus of Nightmares. Signing out.